11 years ago, I had my upper esophagus and stomach biopsied for cancer. I was on max dose of prescription medications for stomach acid and ulcers, which if you've never had them, really doesn't sound that serious, but when they're really bad, it can actually be quite debilitating. I was on maximum dose of prescription proton pump inhibitor, which basically means you have little tiny pumps in your stomach that will pump out acid, and when they work in overtime, that's not a good thing. So those are supposed to shut off the little pumps. However, it doesn't really always work. And so at the time, I was in my late 20s. I had a 4-year-old and less than a 1-year-old, so basically an infant. And I was having to order my life around taking these prescription medications up to 6 times a day. You had to take them on an empty stomach. When you're taking a proton pump inhibitor, you're supposed to take it on an empty stomach, so you have to time it around when you're eating. But then when I did want to eat, the ulcers and the stomach acid were so bad that I had to take a prescription. It acts basically like a chemical Band-Aid, but your stomach has to be empty in order for it to coat your stomach before you can eat to try to eliminate a lot of the pain that's associated with it. So as you can imagine, trying to figure out when to eat and taking all this stuff on an empty stomach was really taking over my life, and it really wasn't helping. I was still having a lot of breakthrough acid and a lot of pain. So I ended up going to a specialist, and at first they were just going to order an endoscope. So they needed to see what was happening because nothing was working with modern medicine. And I went in, and once they got in with the endoscope and were looking at things, they saw cellular change, quite a bit of erosion, and enough that they wanted to do biopsies. So they ended up taking a biopsy of both on my esophagus and in my upper stomach. Now, the biopsies came back benign, so I did not have cancer, which was really good, but they showed that there was cellular change there. And so the specialist basically just told me, he said, look, you're gonna have to figure out a way to manage this without any of these prescription medications. You've already been on them way too long and at max doses that's not safe. We don't like to see anybody on these doses, and especially for as long as you've been off them. So you have to find a way to manage this, or the next time that you come back, it's probably not going to be benign. And so I remember he gave me this huge stack of papers, and I remember coming out of his office, and we live really rurally, so I had about a 45-minute drive home. And I remember that those stack of papers were just sitting there beside me as I was driving home, and I remember thinking, I have to figure this out if I want to be here for my kids and for my family, and I don't even want to live like this anymore. I mean, I couldn't sleep. I was very thin because anytime I ate, no matter what I ate, it caused pain. And basically, I wanted to be here, and I wanted to be healthy. And I wanted to know that as much as I could control, which can't control everything, but if I could figure out a way to do this with my food and my lifestyle, then the likelihood of me being here for my children as they got older and being, for all the life events that you think of with your kids, like graduation and marriage and grandkids and all of that, would be a possibility. And I also wanted those years to not be filled with medications and tests and scopes and all of those things. So I made up my mind on the way home that I was going to do everything possible, no matter how hard it was, with my diet in order to control it. And that has been the catalyst for now how we live and everything that we do. And at the time, I really thought that I was already eating well. We didn't go out to eat a lot. I wasn't going through drive-thru. I wasn't eating a ton of processed foods. And we actually already had a garden, and I did some canning. But what I discovered is a lot of the things that I was using were convenience mixes. So I was still making stuff up and cooking it in the oven or cooking it on the stovetop, but the ingredients that I were using had a lot of things in them that were actually triggering a lot of my acid that I would have never realized had I not begun eliminating them. So everybody always wants to know, well, what are some of the first things that you did? So I went through and I took out all the ingredients in the cupboard, and I started looking at all of the labels on everything. And so I remember right here in this cupboard, I had a big can of Crisco shortening. Apparently this is always where I keep my fats when I'm baking. And I remember pulling it out and looking at the ingredient label and all the different oils and hydrogenated fats and things that were in that. And I started doing research on genetically modified crops and things like soybean oil and what were hydrogenated fats and how did they work in our body and just all of the food, and really just super sleuthing in and seeing how things affected us. And as you can see, this is not shortening. This is organic virgin coconut oil, which I use to replace the Crisco shortening. We do not use any vegetable oil. So regular vegetable oil, this is organic extra virgin olive oil, but regular vegetable oil or canola oil, that again is a highly genetically modified crop for the most part. And so I switched to avocado oil. Now, when I was first trying to decide what oil I was going to use to replace that, I tried doing just regular melted butter, which I do love melted butter in a lot of my baking, real butter, by the way, no margarine allowed. And I tried using some of the different types of olive oil and different oils, but I found that the olive oil left a little bit of an aftertaste that I wasn't crazy about. But the avocado oil has been great to use in cakes and things like that. It doesn't have any aftertaste, and I've been really happy with it. And health-wise, it's a really great all-purpose cooking oil to replace vegetable oil and canola oil. Those were kind of some of the first things. I did cut out coffee. So I was a huge coffee and a huge, part of me cringes as I try to admit this now, or not try to admit it, but I share it with you on camera. I was a huge Diet Coke girl. No Diet Pepsi, Diet Coke was it. But I know that it was really bad for me. I already knew that. I already knew that aspartame and things weren't so great for me, but it was just one of those things that I just really enjoyed. However, I started to correlate, and this is really how for me I decided what things to cut out and what things to come in, is I really started to pay attention to my body in even greater detail. And so anytime I would begin to drink a Diet Coke, within 20 minutes of drinking it, I would have a lot of pain in my stomach and even up through my rib cage. Not burning like acid, which is kind of interestingly, there were other foods that I would really feel the acid burning, but I would actually feel pain from it. And it took me a little bit to put that correlation together. So I cut out Diet Coke completely and I just did it cold turkey. I just started drinking water, and I have still to this day not had a Diet Coke. It has been over 11 years, and I've never brought soda back in. But the other thing that was also triggering is coffee, which for most people, you figure coffee, we know coffee is kind of considered an acidic food. And so I cut out coffee and I cut out a lot of things and went to just a very basic diet for about 6 months, because it took me 6 months to actually get off all of those medications. So anytime you're on a proton pump inhibitor, well, anytime you're on any medication, you need to check with your pharmacist or doctor before just discontinuing it. But especially with proton pump inhibitors, if you stop taking them immediately without tapering down, it can cause a trigger where it makes the acid pumps in your body go into like hyperdrive. And so you have to be really careful and slowly taper off of them so that you don't induce that. So it took me about 6 months to slowly back down off everything. And so for 6 months, I cut out all coffee. And at that time, I wasn't drinking the organic shade grown. I wasn't really doing organic anything, just except we raised our vegetables organic, and we were raising our own meat at that time, and we were doing it organically. But that was kind of it. Like, I didn't really, when I went to the store, I didn't really pay attention to organic. And I still don't buy everything organic. I kind of go by the Dirty Dozen, or it's very ingredient specific. But over 6 months of really paying attention to everything that I was eating and swapping out all of the different things in the kitchen, it made a huge difference. I was able to come off all of the medications. It's now been over 11 years. I've never had to go back on them. I've never had the ulcers come back. And it's been completely life transforming. It's amazing to me how food and what we put into our bodies and just what we eat, just that, can completely change your life, and you can find healing. And it hasn't just been me. There's been so many stories of readers who just listen to the podcast or watch the YouTube videos, or members who are in the Pioneering Today Academy, which is my membership, and my courses, and to see them experience the same thing. And they don't all have ulcers or stomach acid issues like I did, but just a variety of different health things. And just by making those changes, they experience a lot of healing and an improved way of life. And it's really exciting and really rewarding. But I will warn you, as you go down this journey, it is something that you will work on all the time, but it quickly spreads to all aspects of your life. So I really just started in the kitchen, which then led us to putting up more and more of our own food and raising it and growing it ourselves. One, to make it affordable, but two, there was a lot of things, 10 and 11 years ago that we have available now when you go to the grocery store. There's a lot more, there's been a rise of people being more health conscious and making those choices, and our voices are being heard by the companies because they're creating more food that is better for us. But it made us do all of this. So this is just one of the cupboards, but we don't buy any tomato products from the store. That was a biggie. I wanted my food in glass. I didn't want stuff in plastic or in metal cans if we could help it, especially acidic things like tomatoes. I didn't want high fructose corn syrup in my tomato sauce. I didn't want added sugar in my tomato sauce. And a lot of people who have stomach acid or ulcers think of tomato as an acidic food, which tomatoes can be acidic. But what's interestingly is with the homegrown tomatoes and all of my tomato products that I make from my own tomatoes, which I make all of my, obviously, tomato sauce and tomato soup and everything like that, I don't have any problem. Tomatoes do not trigger my acid reflux at all, which has been really interesting to see. And like I said, it quickly went from the garden and then to raising all of our own meat. So we raise our own grass-fed beef, our own organic pasture-raised pork. We butcher and raise our own meat chickens. I've got videos on that I'll link to at the end here that you can go and watch more of that if you're interested. And of course, chickens for eggs. So we have our laying hens. But even beyond that, it went to looking at the type of makeup that I was using because our skin is our biggest organ. So then I started making all of my own homemade body soap and homemade moisturizers and not using lotions with synthetic fragrances and swapping out our cleaners to more natural products, including the laundry soap that I was using and the clothes that were going on my skin and that of my kids and my family. So like I said, it has been an incredible journey and one I'm still learning a lot of, but it has been so worth it. So if you are struggling with any of those things or are wanting to improve your quality of life, of course I can't make any claims, but all I can say is it has been life transforming for myself and for my family.